So this is by no means a test, but just so I have some idea. How many of you guys, this is like the first time you've seen the book? Today's the first time you've seen the book? Yeah. Okay. That's you. How many of you have at least had a chance to skim it? Okay. How many of you have read it? Oh, okay. So we got a whole spectrum of people here. So we'll wait for people to come in before I'll start off with the basics on who Dante was. Huh?
The video needs to be turned off.
Yeah, I'm not starting to speak yet. I'm just sort of breaking the ice here.
Okay, now.
We're ready to start.
Okay. So just to sort of break the ice here, I'm going to start with the basics. In case you weren't aware, this is a modern adaptation of Dante's Inferno. Dante's Inferno is an epic poem. It's part of his Divine Comedy that was written back in 1300 AD. Dante lived in Florence, Italy. So I'm going to start with the basics, and then we're going to get more and more complicated until we get completely incomprehensible. So the people at all levels can have a chance to learn something. Again, this is based on Dante's Inferno. It's the first of a trilogy, Dante's Divine Comedy. The basic plot is that he's sort of lost in the woods. He has no idea where his life is going. And Virgil, an epic poet from ancient Rome, comes to meet him from beyond the grave, and he tells him his old lover is crying for him in heaven and wants to help him find his way again. So Virgil, since those who are in heaven really don't want anything to do with hell, she summons Virgil, who basically is stuck in limbo because he's not Christian. But he leads Dante through hell, where Dante can see the futility of the evil ways and how it's self-destructive, until he meets Satan and comes out the other end, goes through purgatory, where he can sort of get rid of his wicked ways and evil inclinations until he's ready to enter heaven. And that's where Beatrice, his lover who had died in her youth, she's able to lead him through heaven until he sees God himself and finds himself again. So it's a very beautiful poem. The problem is that it was written in 1300, and so it gets caught in a lot of very old politics, a lot of very old personalities, so it's really hard to understand. But if you put the effort into it, you put a lot of effort into it, it's a really beautiful poem, and it's a very human poem, a very evocative poem. Most people, they've only read Dante's Inferno, and that's all they really teach in schools. Ironically, I never even read Dante in high school or in college. The closest thing I got to reading was The Prince by Machiavelli, who was, I think he was a bit later than Dante, but same sort of like medieval Italian politics, really cutthroat, really, ruthless, but very honest, and with an idea, because you had all these new trade routes forming, all this new wealth coming into Florence and Italy, and so this whole new world was being born out of medieval society. So there's a lot of potential for society. So there's a lot of heaven and hell going on in society. People ask me what inspired me to write it, because I read a lot of classics. I read, Plato, Aristotle, John Locke, Marx, you name it. And I have a lot of friends who did too. But rather, I was really involved in politics in my 20s. And without getting too far into it, I wasn't so much into Democrat or Republican politics, but I learned that really early on that political change, real change in society or in politics, it happens on the street that happens when, what millions of people decide to do. And so I started talking to as many people as I could and got their opinions and tried to discuss with them like what they think about the world and and what it would take to make things change. And in fact, one of my closest colleagues says, the good thing about you is you're willing to talk to everybody. And, I thought that was a given. If you want to get into politics, you have to be willing to talk to everybody. But most people don't. They have their own circle, and if you're not in the circle, they don't want to talk to you. But another one of my colleagues who was also interested in talking to as many people as he could, he was a devout Catholic, and he was the one who turned me on to Dante. He didn't have to say too much. He just, he turned me on to some interesting parallels between the politics of Dante's time and the politics of our time. So, one of the things about Dante's Inferno and the rest of his comedy is that it's intensely political as well. The thing is, when you talk to a lot of different people, you start to hear the same things over and over again, and not just about political issues, but personal issues as well. And that's what got me interested more and more into what Dante was talking about, that, politics has something to do with salvation and God. The problem is when people retreat into their personal lives and just retreat into their personal issues, then then that's when they start to suffer, And it's like Aristotle said that for somebody not to engage in politics, they have to be either a beast or a god. And so I started to notice how, people would act pretty beastly or egomaniacal if they wanted to stay out of it. So that's what got me into it. And the more I looked at Dante's Inferno, the more parallels I saw. The more I saw that really things hadn't changed much. The politics of Dante's society. I mean, you have like you have the Pope, who's a lot more powerful. You have a different type of city politics. In Dante's time, everybody knew each other. Florence was a city of like 100,000 people or so. So whatever was going on in the city, everybody knew about it. But a lot of things, we're still very much the same to what we go through. So what got me, and what gets most people about Dante's Inferno is they really like the imagery. He has really, and it's one of the reasons we decided to do a graphic novel about it, is it's really evocative language that really brings out like the scenery of hell. So, sorry, let me capture my thoughts here. And so that's what they think. You see a lot of adaptations of Dante's Inferno, and what I've always seen is they more just want to show the scenery. Look at all these monstrous creatures. Look at all this like crazy stuff happening. But what really got to me is the way people talk in the Inferno, and the way people see the world around them who are stuck in his Inferno is it's a direct reflection of the hellish scene around them. That they're all, people are all damned in their own way, but the way they talk, the way they all damn each other, the way they talk shit about each other, for pardon the expression, the way they alienate themselves from each other, that's all the same going through hell. And so that's when you see that it's not just about the scenery, it's not just about the cool monsters and stuff, but it's the way people talk and the way people see the world. And that's what really got me. And that's what I felt I wanted to do with the modern adaptation. That, if hell really is a timeless thing, if hell doesn't change, if heaven doesn't change, then what they were going through back then would be no different than what we're going through today. So that's what got me started. And to be honest, I never expected to be there. I never expected this to be a book. At that time in my life, at that point, politics was pretty overwhelming. It just seemed like, nothing was ever going to happen. I met a lot of really unsavory characters as well, and it just felt like they had the upper hand. They didn't really have any friends. I was in a no good job, and everybody else was settling down. So it's pretty much where Dante starts his Inferno. He's lost in the wood. His way's gotten lost. The main love in his life died like a few years ago. So he's like, where am I? What am I doing? This isn't going to end well. And that's the part that got me to start writing the book. So it started off as sort of an intellectual exercise. I met another friend who was a converted Catholic, and we would meet for Chinese food and watch these Dante lectures on DVD. And that was around 2000. I was a bit of a nerd in college. Still am. And so, I started writing out snippets and chapters and how I'd see different chapters happening in a graphic novel form. And like I said, I wanted to do a graphic novel and not just a book because I wanted something that would be accessible to everybody. And I feel vindicated right now about it because, like my girlfriend's 10-year-old, she picked up the book and she looks at the pictures and she's obsessed with poop. So she saw the layer of flattery and she saw the poop and she asked me all sorts of questions about poop. And so it became a discussion of, well, you ever heard of the term brown noser? That's what flattery is,
Brown noser? What's
brown noser, I'll tell you. You kiss somebody's butt, your nose gets brown. Yeah, well,
all my Italian friends take notes.
Yeah, it's funny because people ask me, is this book going to be offensive? Is it fit for kids? I'm like, well, it depends what you think is fit for kids, but it's hell it's going to be offensive. But we'll get into that more later. So anyway, 2008, I'm like, well, I've written enough. If I want to write something for a graphic novel, I really need to get an artist involved. And that's when I just put an ad out on Craigslist for an artist. And that's where people really liked my writing. And I'm like, really? You think I'm a writer? Okay, cool. And I had a number of people who wanted to work with me. And Jim was by far and away not only the best drawing, but the most professional. So that's what got me to decide working with him. Yeah, that's Jim right there. And he's not just a really good artist, but he was able to bring the professionalism we really needed to make it a book worth printing. Otherwise, I would have been lost a long time ago. I have a story of when I met him at a cafe, but I'll tell that later in the interest of time. So that's when we started working. We had, and then the next part of the project that really helped us take off was in 2010. We had a Kickstarter campaign where we managed to raise $6,000 for the printing of the book. Now, people were wondering why I called it Inferno Los Angeles. It was actually originally called Inferno 2010, which shows you how unprofessional I was in doing the book. I had this weird idea that we'd be done by 2010, we'd print it out, and I could do Purgatory 2011 and Paradise 2012 and have 3 books ready in 3 years. That didn't happen. But I also wanted to give the idea that, my book is as dated as Dante's. Every generation experiences heaven and hell on its own terms, and hopefully somebody in the next generation or in a few years can do something that's equally evocative for their generation. But basically, because of the Kickstarter project, we also got a bunch of people on board that wanted to play a more active part, and so they started making recommendations, and a few of them made the recommendations. let's name it Inferno Los Angeles as well. And we decided to change it to that. We only changed it like last year when it was almost complete. Our idea was calling it Inferno Los Angeles would make it a lot easier to relate to because, you know, who doesn't think of hell when they think of LA? But it also draws on LA's noir reputation. I don't know if you guys know about noir literature. It's just this whole idea of seedy Los Angeles. It's the detective who sits there in his like steamy office and getting to his legs to New York comes into his office. You know, a real sort of black crime novel. So we drew on that. But the other thing about LA is LA is really not that different from Florence historically. I mean, when you think of Florence, when you read about Florence, you see it as a city that's flowing with new money and new opportunities, where people have all sorts of liberties to do what they will for good or evil. And there's a poet I heard on NPR who even said there's no difference between a modern mall and Florence at its prime. The same social factors, the same commercial factors are all coming into play in both situations. So, you know, that's how we wound up framing the book. And so the idea was that, you know, the Inferno, once you get to the basic of Dante's Inferno, there's a very simple, powerful, timeless message. But the references to people in Dante's Inferno are 700 years old. Like, nobody knows who, you know, Guido de Montefeltro is, or what I don't even remember anymore. You know, you have dukes and you know, Dante was mayor of Florence for 2 months. There's a weird thing there. There's you know, the church was the main intellectual arm as well as the religious arm. So, you know, you have the different the playing out of different things. It's really impossible to get what's going on. And when I also say that, you know, politics plays a major part in how the Divine Comedy plays out, then if people don't know the politics, then they don't get a key part of the Inferno. So that was where we set out. And I thought the other. So that was the idea. I mean, I felt that if you really wanted to get something out of the book, you need to look into the way the characters talk. And that's where I thought we could offer something that's beyond your traditional Dante adaptation. And it's deeper than just drawing out the scenarios Dante painted out, but something that actually delves into how characters talk, the doom and gloom that they see in the world, and how the doom and gloom is not actually happening in the world, but is just a reflection of their own character. Somebody was asking me actually about the beginning of the book and how that's an adaptation of the Inferno, and that was actually the hardest one for me to adapt because Dante's imagery is not only old, but it's also obscure. He talks about being, you know, like I say, he talks about being lost in a dark forest, which you can all kind of get that. You know, it's like the road less traveled, being lost in the woods. Simple imagery. But then he gets confronted with 3 beasts, a leopard, and then a lion, and then finally a starving she-wolf that block him from going anywhere. Like, he's just going to be permanently lost in the woods. You can kind of see a sunny hill on the horizon, and that's kind of like leading the good life, but he can't get there because it's 3 animals. What are the 3 animals? There's all sorts of discussion about that, but I had to go by the translator's best guesses, is that the 3 animals represent the 3 stages of life. That the flamboyantly colored leopard represents the flashiness and hedonism of youth. You know, you think of like club goers dressed up in flashy attire. The lion represents the pride of middle age, and your interesting career and me. And the starving she-wolf represents the avarice of old age. You're always trying to like live old age. Avarice. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, it's also old language in the Inferno. So we try to modernize that into a more modern language. So that was the beginning of the Inferno, and that's what I was saying earlier. The problem with feeling lost is really what's happening is that the evil of the world seems overwhelming, and there's no opportunity for you to do anything or good or meaningful in your life because it's all going to get wrecked. But it's also the proper place for the examination of your life and your worldview. From a place of total defeat. It's kind of like Descartes, who's like, or what is real, what is true, and he makes his first statement, I think, therefore I am. So you have to start there. If you start with any kind of sureness about the world, then you might want to have to re-examine it. So, and that was actually sort of sorry, I'm kind of like traveling all over the place here. That's one of the problems I see with our modern times is that, at the same time we're both proudly secular, but we still all have a moral view of how the world works. And the more of the moral view we have, we sort of take it for granted and not meriting any examination. But the whole point of philosophy and of theology and of the Divine Comedy is to doubt and examine that moral view. So that's really what we see when we go through the book. And some examples that I like to bring out. The first one, what did you guys think about, for example, the scene on lust? Does anybody remember that? Where they're all sort of caught up in a whirlwind and they can't get any rest or any even reduction of pain. So, the lady at the end that I talked to in the circle of lust, she says, is falling in love just a mirage that makes us feel alone? Well, yes, it's love is a very difficult topic I'm not even going to try to get into. But what can she see for sure about this woman is, she's lost in her own infatuation. We can feel pity for her as well as anybody who feels overwhelmed, but it's also why letting infatuation overwhelm you is like the first step to hell. Some of the parts here are hard to illustrate, and that's why I always felt like I could never get quite where I wanted in this book. There was a scene in there, and there's a scene in also the original Inferno, where the sinners in the circle of lust are trying to bash their way back out of the cave, hurl themselves at the doorway, trying to remember that moment of infatuation that damned them forever. And it rings also true, the breakup or an old fling that, it's really hard for the mind to stop dwelling on. And it reveals deeper lessons about it. The next layer is a similar issue. It gives us the first idea of how sin and error leads to points of doom and gloom. The guy in the circle of gluttony, he doesn't seem like a bad guy. He actually, he doesn't have any ill will towards anybody. What you see about what he says about people seems pretty true. It seems pretty well thought out. And this is one thing where I hope I brought it out in the way he talks. He's certainly somebody who's fallen out of love with the human race. He's like, fuck it, I'm just going to go do my own thing. And what's the recourse for somebody who's given up on people like that? It's gluttony. It's literally glutting oneself on the things that give you an illusion of your humanity, whether it's food or luxury or idle pursuit. I mean, these things can provide a illusory comfort, but in the end, it's trying to make up for this spiritual agony. I'm not going to go through all of them, obviously, but I wanted to give this as an idea of how people talk and what I was trying to bring out in the book. And that brings us, I'm almost done here. And it brings us to another part of the Inferno is, I don't know if you guys see, there's a lot of diagrams out there, some older than others, that try to diagram the Inferno Dante made. Oh, this is the first layer, this is limbo, this is the second layer. And it makes it look like it's a filing system, like you just throw people in a filing cabinet. But Dante never did that. he never said this is circle 1, this is circle 2. In fact, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Oh. And when I was working on that one with Jim, Jim said, well, should this be circle 1? Should this be circle 2? And I said, no, we shouldn't number them because Dante never did. And there's a big reason for that. And the real genius of the Inferno is that it ultimately paints a downward spiral. This is where a downward spiral comes from. That the idea with Dante, right, is once you're dead, that's it. You no longer have the chance for salvation, because salvation is only the product of the living. But you also don't have the chance to get any worse. Whereas if you're living, the only solution for one form of agony is a deeper form of sin. So you go from frustration to violence to fraud, and then finally to treachery. And real uplifting topics here, but it gets better. So, and in fact, in the book itself, and I didn't even try to mimic this, Dante's path itself follows a downward spiral. He goes down to the left a bit, down to the left a bit, down to the left a bit. And so if you trace the way he goes through hell, except for a couple of rightward turns which have some weird significance in himself, he's following like a little whirlpool down to the center. So that's what he's trying to do. It is the underworld for the living has a dynamic nature. Dante doesn't describe the layers so much as here's so and so, here's such and such, but A leads to B leads to C leads to D, and so on. And like I said, depending on your outlook, this can be a good thing. For example, in one of the layers of hell, we go to the suicides, and I have this big encounter with a tree female named Carrie, and her final sort of curse to me is, I'll wind up a lot worse than she ever did. So it's a harrowing thought, but it takes us back to what I said earlier, that the damned don't see any hope for others. They only see everybody else winding up in the same place. And that's why afterwards Dante gives me an encouraging word, so I don't feel too hopeless after that. That was one of my more personal layers. Some of the layers have more personal experience than others. Some I had to go by with simple conversations I had with people. I remember the guy in Seducers. It was just a conversation I had at a bar that struck me really well. It really was a guy that immigrated to LA because he saw some music video of a guy like walking over all these bikini babes. And it looked like he was gonna get that. Huey Lewis. Do you remember that video? Yeah, classic video. And then, I met a lot of industry people in college, and I'm like, oh, that's what it takes to make it. Some I just went by other media that did their homework. Like, I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie Frost Nixon? About Richard Nixon. I thought that was a really good analysis of Nixon, but you can kind of see how that guy was suffering in that book. And you can go into, well, is this an accurate portrayal or so-and-so? I always felt like that's irrelevant. I mean, the relevant part for me is to see how people suffer for what they do, and that in the end, to see it is actually, because hell is ultimately a liberating experience. Because the traditional thought of a person like Nixon is this like diabolical character who's like, who's pulling all sorts of strings and has all these powers and can throw the world into chaos. But when you see him in Frost Nixon, and also the way I tried to show him in the underworld, you see this pretty sad, relatively innocent person that he is. He's sad. He's overwhelmed by the opposing forces around him. You see his evil's kind of pitiful. He's busy trying to find the demons in his own head. And even then, he had real talents as a human being. And you see them for what they were. He was able to connect to people and organize them on that. And that's what got him as far as he did. So, despite you see in the end, it paints a liberating picture for all of us. And because you see that ultimately, whether somebody is fundamentally evil or not, it's their good qualities that winds up getting them anywhere. And it's what makes them memorable. So, people, Inferno is not, it's easy to make it, it's easy to think of the Inferno as a downer. It's easy to think of the Inferno as a place to put people you hate. But I think that if people do that, they're missing the point of the book. That as Dante says in the beginning of the Inferno, or Virgil says to Dante in the beginning of the Inferno, you can't just go find the good life by walking towards that hill. Those animals will always block you. In order to find the good life again and to find your way again, you have to go into the underworld. You have to go through hell first. And only by going through hell first, you can truly spiritually liberate yourself. And you see it over and over again. It says in the beginning, you have to keep your eyes wide open. You have to keep your clear vision open. You can't be suspicious. You can't be cowardly, or you'll get eaten alive. But in every layer, he sees not only the futility of what it is they do, but he becomes liberated from that. He realizes this is not a good thing to do. I get it now. And only finally, when he sees the end of it all, sees where it all leads to, sees that sort of choking, freezing of the soul that it leads to, can he crawl through and come back out the other end and see the stars and see the sky for the first time and breathe the free air that makes him human once again. And I think that in modern times, there's a lot of people that do not breathe free air, that feel overwhelmed by the world, that feel hopeless, and that's ultimately why I wrote the Inferno. It's why I wanted to do it, to give people an idea that there is a moral vision. It's a moral vision that can liberate you. It's a moral vision that can sort of free you from the things that drag you down. And I don't claim to have the absolute truth at all in it, but hopefully the book can give people some new insights that they haven't seen before. And that's why I picked it. Pick the graphic novel medium, like I said, because it's a lot easier to relate to. Like I said, my girlfriend's 10-year-old can pick it up and ask some questions. People can browse through it and look at it, browse it at their leisure, see something that strikes them and read the words around it and sort of draws them in. And that's actually what's given us success. So we've taken this book to several conventions, and what draws people to our table time and time again is the art. If we just had a book with words on it, it wouldn't have the draw of it. In the last 20, 25 years or so, you've seen graphic novels become more serious as a medium. It used to be either you read comic books or you read books. And if children read comic books, grown-ups read books. And then you had Art Spiegelman, Mouse. He wrote Mouse like 25 years ago or so. And that really made graphic novels legitimate as a serious writing medium. and you have some other mediums as well, or some other writers as well. And my mom and I both love Persepolis. Have you guys read that book? Marjan Satrapi, amazing book. Really easy to read.
Make a movie as well.
Yeah, the movie's amazing. She's funny because she said if she would have done the movie itself, it would have come out like some boring book, and if her colleague did it himself, it would have come out like an Arnold Schwarzenegger film. So the collaboration between the two really made it beautiful. Persepolis.
It's about the revolution in Persia, in Iran.
Yeah.
The artist lives in Paris.
We saw it at Royce Hall, didn't we?
Yeah, they had a writer there is another lady who wrote reading Lolita in Tehran. So they interviewed the two of them in Royce Hall.
So, on a more ancient level, I mean, the Catholic Church, I mean, that's why the Sistine Chapel was drawn. They needed a graphic novel format to educate people on the Bible, because most people didn't know how to read. So it's like, there's the creation of the earth, there's the fall from grace, and you have, murals all over churches depicting different things. Because the idea about, theology and religion and scripture is you want to make it available to everybody. There's a reason, Hammurabi's code is this giant pillar that's in the center of town. It is the law that's available for everybody. There's a reason why in Judaism it's required for everybody to be buried, because it is available for everybody. And so, if somebody who's read the classics, I wanted to make something that is available for everybody. These are very simple lessons. These are very simple concepts. And I'd like as many people to have access to it as possible, so you can get locked up in libraries. And I think with that, I've said everything I need to say. I'd like to open it up if you guys have any questions.
Oh, sure. Well, can take us through purgatory and heaven?
My joke with purgatory and heaven is people have to want salvation. So if I have enough demand for the books, I will write a sequel, especially if I can get a financier to help me and Jim do it. But,
Great.
There's a good saying behind that. It had two different. One of the translators I like was Dorothy Sayers, and her saying was, "To only read Dante's Inferno is like visiting Paris through its sewers." Yeah. Which, the sewers are definitely a tourist attraction, and you can go see Paris if that's all you're seeing and kind of getting a sneaky view of it. Purgatory is actually probably one of the most human books about people who try to be better and the struggles they have. The wrath is you're stuck in this. You think of the tall mountain with the cloud, the tall imposing mountain with the cloud halfway up it. You're holy crap. That's purgatory, and that cloud halfway up the mountain is the circle of wrath, because people who are trying to deal with their own wrath are stuck in this black cloud of rage that's blinding them, so they're trying to find their way out of it. So there's all sorts of cool stuff. And then paradise, it's not just some heaven or liturgical heaven. You're talking about the latest knowledge, the latest in optics and the latest in astronomy and
chemistry.
Yeah, it's no small accident that the speed of light is absolute. It's a great concept to talk about in heaven. The world is in flux, but the speed of light is absolute. I love it, but ultimately I'm stuck in the material world, so I need to find the time and the money on the market to make it happen. So there's your. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that you want to redefine Dante's morality in a more modern, liberal, or tolerant sense.
Yes and no. Liberal and tolerant. My Catholic friend, the one who turned me on to Dante, he had a great saying. You know, in Facebook they asked, "What are your political beliefs?" And his answer is the opposite of libertarianism. And that you do have obligations to your fellow human beings. You are bound by the struggles of the time, and you find your freedom in grappling with it instead of just going your own way. I mean, it's one of the classic scenes in The Gateway to Hell is it's really all the people that just kind of live for themselves. And I mean, nobody's damning you. You have to understand that there is no like God that sits there in judgment. If that's all you're doing with your life, you're gonna feel a certain amount.
Well, can you explain the heretics section then? Leon Trotsky. Apparently, his views were unpopular, and so he's in hell.
Yeah, Leon Trotsky, I'm surprised anybody got that. I mean, I was like, dude, is anybody even going to know what I'm talking about? Because I read a lot about Leon Trotsky, but the sad fact about Leon Trotsky is he wasn't very good with people. He wasn't very good with people. Stalin was much more of a street fighter and much more of a people's man than Trotsky was. And so Stalin managed to beat him out when push came to shove and departed. That's how Stalin came to power. So Trotsky was a heretic just in the sense that he had very abstract views about people, and when it came to actually dealing with people, like his views kind of fell flat. And I think that's a problem that heretic is such a loaded word. You know, you think heretic, you think of an obsolete church that's trying to like get rid of people that are actually the Catholic Church at that point is a heretic. Like it's the new ideas that are winning the day and they're trying to stop it. But a heretic is also somebody that has a set of ideas that don't really work. And so they're like stuck with their ideas and they're like dead ideas. So they're stuck, that's why they're stuck in a burning grave. They're burning with passion for these ideas that aren't working, but they're stuck in a grave. And one of the points that one of the interpreters made was, it's not just him in that grave, it's the other guy who was a colleague of mine that popped out of that grave. And they're stuck in that same grave together for an eternity, but they don't even notice the existence of the other person. You know, they have these overarching ideas about the world that they can't even talk to each other.
But is Stalin somewhere in hell? I mean, he won over Trotsky, and you could say that.
Hitler's not in hell either, and I didn't put Stalin and Hitler in hell for very specific reasons because it's not. Look, like I said in one of the layers of hell, you only have your very narrow sliver of a very wide universe, right? And ultimately, what you see in hell is the people you personally connect to and the people you personally can relate to. Ultimately, people like Stalin and Hitler are part of such complicated world views or world history that I'm not even going to touch them. You know what I mean? We like to have our boogeymen, and Stalin and Hitler become historical boogeymen, and I wanted to avoid boogeymen in the book. I wanted people that people could actually relate to, people could actually care about, and that's one of the painful parts about hell, is that it's people you care about that go in there. It's not just boogeymen. You get what I'm saying? Yeah.
But Nixon's in there.
Yeah, well, like I said, Nixon's American. I mean, he's easy to relate to. You know about him. Like I said, we have the Frost Nixon thing. And some of the things are harder to write about than others. You know, you wanted to find somebody that people knew something about, people could relate to on a personal or a more political level. I was kind of worried about putting Nixon in there because he is a boogeyman to a lot of people. But I felt like with a movie like Frost Nixon, that really sort of brought out the actual Nixon, that you could draw out the character and see what story does this story do. Yeah, exactly.
So it stays in between, and you really both as much as you're met.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I wanted to bring out. You know, he was a very interesting politician. He was able to relate to the working man, which in those days was not very easy to do. You know.
So it's like everybody has their own individual hell that they go through in order to reach salvation. And then go out of there.
Yeah. Well, it's a classic Tolstoy line. You guys ever heard about that? All families share the same kind of joy, but each suffers in its own private way. It's no accident that Tolstoy was a religious man as well. He said that. That's a good question. I'm glad. One of the other sections of the book that I wrote, speaking of tragedy, one of the sections that got to me that I really wanted to write about was the layer of the violence. And I don't know if you guys caught that, but I felt like Dante's exploration of the violence sounds a lot like post-traumatic stress. That it's really the people dealing with the violence they've committed and seen. And and it's not necessarily something that's within your control. If you get enlisted and sent to war, you see and do some crazy shit. You have to. That's what war is, and all civilization has war. And one of my favorite lines in the book is that the knife edge of civilization is always bloody. But some people, that's why having some kind of perspective to come home to, some kind of fellowship, people to help you readjust and acclimate is so important. Otherwise, they fall through the cracks. Yeah. Not necessary. I mean, I wrote the book so that if anything, it helps to read this before you read the original.
I think so.
Yeah. Because like I said, you read the original and it's like the poem's 1 page and the notes are 2 pages. And so you read 3 to 5 lines, you flip through the notes. You read 3 to 5 more lines, you flip through the notes. Figure out what you're talking about here, what are you talking about there. It is a job. And even if you're ready to do it, you lose the flow of the poem. You should be able to read the poem like a poem, like Shakespeare. But it's hard to do, so that's why I wrote the book. Like I said, in the end, the book, you should try to read the original poem because it is hilarious.
Is there any particular way that you can read it out loud or something to give you inspiration?
That would be more like a dramatic reenactment. I don't know if I'm. No, I'm not gonna do that. No.
So in a graphic novel set, it's not really poetic; it's more visual.
Right. Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of different. Is there anything you wanted to add, Jim? One of Jim's favorite lines is when he first saw the job that I needed. He's like, hell, it's a bunch of rocks and flames. Shouldn't be a problem.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of people there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add, I think.
How long did it take you from beginning to end to really get through the process of drawing?
Roughly 4 years. We went through a lot of changes. And changed a lot of different things on it. Okay. So, over a period of time, and then coloring it.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at something this size and it's done by professional studios, you see the credits is like a page or two long, you know, not like a bunch of people working on it. But it was just myself and Jim for all. We found a couple Easters to come on in the last part to help us.
Yeah, we had a couple. Really rare people to help.
Yeah.
So 2010, they had the Kickstarter campaign, and a guy from Australia donated $500, you know, like out of nowhere.
Oh, we had a lot of people
So,
that
if you
surprised
go to
me.
the Kickstarter page, do you have all your updates?
Yeah.
We sent updates on the to all the people who donated the money, and in the update you can see now we are going through this process, and now we are going through this process. So I recommend everyone to look at the Kickstarter campaign page. We have a friend who is a Shakespearean actor who did the voiceover for the video.
Yeah.
Usually they couldn't come tonight. So,
Yeah, we self-publish. You know, the thing about the publishing world these days is there's so much you can do for yourself via the internet as far as putting everything together and getting the word out. And the publishers these days, I mean, the real concern is it's not so much whether we write is good, but whether you're well known or not. And you know, even now when people love our book, they say, you know, you gotta just get better known, and then people will. The more well known you are, the more people will be interested in you. So we discovered that, you know, by the time publishers are interested in you, they don't really have anything to add. You know, and you wind up doing so much better for yourself just representing yourself. The publisher represents you. You want to get like a pocket logo.
So did you go to WonderCon and Comic-Con?
We went to WonderCon, went to Comic-Con. The funny thing about conventions these days is they're more about being seen than selling books, because everybody can buy everything on the internet now. You don't have to go to conventions to find it.
So what is the ratio of selling versus being in a convention rather than online? Is it pretty much even, or is the internet pretty profitable?
Again, it's all about how well known you are. You really have to sort of lump everything together into a pot and see how well you do. Yeah, right now I can say the thing that's worked out best for us is going to comic book stores and setting up a table at a night when they're relatively crowded and saying, here's us, and, you know, here's the book. And actually conventions, like I said, they're not that great for selling, but you go to enough conventions, you're like, oh yeah, I've heard of you, and then pretty soon they buy. You know, and you just have to keep at it until you become, you know, well known. Oh yeah. I'll talk about it later.
Well, I'm really impressed. You gave a really outstanding synopsis of the book.
Oh,
And what your thinking is about it, and almost a passage through life. I was really impressed with that.
Thank you. I try to do it without sounding too preachy, you know. It says that writing is a confession. Or I think even Marx said labor itself is a confession.
So you have the audio of the book?
The audio of the book?
Yeah.
No, not yet. We don't have the audio. We don't have it. No. Oh, no, that was an ad for the book, like a little promotional video we did for the book. No, it's our friend. It's a really cool video. I was ready to buy the book. What's up?
I just have a question, Rick. So you had a bunch of ideas. How did you get exactly?
That was the most amazing part. You know, I would write. So you write a script and you say, this is what the page should look. You know, this is what's going on the page. This is the scenery I'm seeing. This is what people are saying. This is the position they're in. And I give them the script for the 2 or 3 pages. I say, like, you want any more details, like I'd be happy to give you more details to help you flesh it out. And Jim's like, no, I think I got it. And like a few days later, he sends me back some artwork. I'm like, this is exactly what I was looking for. Like really, we had a really good working relationship. It was amazing. There were a few sections where I'm like for example, the Manticore was very frustrating. Like, this is what it should look like. He did like this. I'm like, no, this. And I try to chicken scratch it out. And he's like, this. I'm like, no. And finally, like, I found somebody online to help me draw Manticore, which, you know, she drew it well, and we incorporated her actual drawing into the book, and she drew the Manticore. But those are very few and far between. And my relationship with Jim has been amazing for the book. That's all Jim. That's all Jim. Yeah. Minus like one or two color choices that I made. Yeah.
How long have you been doing this?
Off and on 20, 30 years, you know. There's been a lot of different things. But yeah, I think that's what I think that's expensive. It's a good experience on that level.
Yeah, and you know, it's one of those things where it's such a long project that our style evolved over time. And so the style we had at the end of the book no longer matched the style that when we started the book. So Jim had to go back and redraw some of the stuff at the beginning of the book to be consistent.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard thing when you're evolving. And then you work to really evolve. That's over a period of time.
Yeah, exactly. Except now imagine Charles Schulz like having to put all those Peanuts cartoons together and say, all right, I have to make one consistent looking book out of it. So there's that. But it's also, you know, I mean, it's also, people have ideas for stuff and all the time for great books, but to just go from idea to finished project, I mean, it was a marathon. Like, every page was an art project all of its own, and at the end, you just have to say, we're done, I'm done editing this, let's move on to the next page. It's good enough, let's go. You know, and it's just the number of things you wind up having to think about between from concept to draft to penciling to bubbling to inking, you know. 5 years is exactly how long it should have been. Neither of us had any idea. We've never done it before.
Was it an everyday thing, or once a week, or?
Well, I don't have any coworkers here, so I did a lot of it at work.
So it wasn't an everyday thing. You just the office for a while.
Kind of. Yeah, I mean, we had some. Jim. I don't know what Jim's work schedule was like. I mean, we had some bottleneck rows, you know, waiting on Jim somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, occasionally I have to do other things.
Yeah. We're not exactly supporting him.
So it becomes like an obsession. Think about it. In your dreams as well.
Yeah, well, you know, especially once the Kickstarter thing funded, we're like, well, there's just kind of a point of no return. You know, I mean,
And that was very fun.
yeah, and that was before Kickstarter was like this huge thing. You know, we basically had to pimp out our book on a daily basis for 2 months. You also learn a bit about advertising, you know, and how to let the world know about your book without sounding pushy. You know, because as soon as people think you're being pushy, that's when they're done with you. You know, and the same thing goes with advertising your book now. It's just, hey, we're here, check us out. You know.
So what did you learn from the start of your project to the end of the project? What did you gain through that expansive project? And what was your
How to not take 5 years to write a book.
okay? Anything else?
Well, like I said, it's just how much work it takes to go from, because we have ideas in our head and they're perfect looking in our imagination, but to take it from your imagination into something tangible that can be seen and touched by the eyes and the hands, like that takes a lot of work. And I think there is something I have to say is that you're always looking at like, oh, I'm no good, or oh, this isn't going to come out good enough. It's never going to come out good enough to match what you have in your imagination. Your imagination is freaking perfect and infinite, But the only thing what kept me going through the book is it's still going to be better than the crap I'm seeing out, But also that like time is valuable too, that you still have to put stuff out, and not putting anything out is the worst thing you can do. Put something out. And like I said, when I first put out my writing, I didn't think my writing was that good. I thought I was being a hack, but people liked it. I'm like, all right, I'll keep writing. So you put stuff out, and you'll surprise yourself, like how good you can be. I mean, people pump stuff out all the time, and I read their stuff. I'm like, we could do something out of this. They think they're just sort of like writing insane ramblings, and not a couple that done that, but most people have something interesting to say.
Well, so do you.
Thanks. So that's my point. I started to see like most people have something interesting to say. But it's the real skill is being able to be disciplined and to see it through to completion. Anybody can write down a bunch of thoughts, but you have to go from that list of thoughts and writing into something cohesive and disciplined. That takes time. It takes effort. It takes money.
We also found out that all the publishers and book distributors are all on the East Coast.
Yeah, that's the other thing. There's a real East Coast bias. What's up? There's
More than ever.
there's a huge readership for comic books these days. The bigger question for me was whether that readership would be interested in reading something like this. And that's one thing I found about publishers and distributors is they have the channel from the writers to the demographics set up. They have a demographic that's ready and waiting for their latest releases. They know the kind of books they want. They find the writers who will write those kinds of books, and then they just keep pumping that stuff out to their demographic.
Yeah.
Inferno Los Angeles, I mean, we're not the Batman, Spider-Man, Superman demographic. We're not the, yeah, exactly. So, for like I said, writing a book was one thing, but sort of building bridges to build a whole new demographic is a whole different thing. It's like you think writing a book is hard, try selling it. That is now a whole new project all of its own. And so that's what we're trying to do. It's not just like comic conventions, but and we're trying to find different religious conventions and things like that, where maybe we can get a couple of priests.
Yeah, I just wanted to say from Spiegelman's book Mouse, which was a gigantic book, to today, Jules Viper's book, which got huge reviews at the New York Times Book Review. There's always
graphic.
A place where, you know,
Something new.
yeah. By the way, I want to say I am totally impressed with your graphics. Yeah.
No, I mean, what we found is once people see us, they love us. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
We went to this comic book store a couple weeks ago and sold our book, and barely anybody showed up, and we still sold more than I imagined we would. Like every other person that came by bought a book. You know, and barely anybody came by. So, you know, the issue for us right now is, well, once people know us, once people get a chance to see us, they like us, and once they read us, they like us even more. They can buy it off the internet, but they can't read it on the internet. They have to actually buy the book. Yeah, no, we're on sale in a few. We're actually Barnes and Noble finally started buying us, but they got some really complicated way to buy it directly from vendors. So I'm still trying to figure that out. But it's happening. Hopefully.
They decided to buy, I don't know how many books, but they then can't buy directly from them. They have to buy it through one of them.
Well, no, they actually sent us a second letter, and they're like, well, okay, if you're having a problem finding a distributor, because basically it's like a catch-22. Either you're selling thousands of books, and then the distributors will talk to you, or you have to pay them like $500 just to get your name in their database, and then like, never mind.
Because this is not a kind of book that you can download.
Yeah, well, it's not just that. What we
This is
found.
the actual, book, like.
Yeah, it's a physical book.
Yeah.
What we discovered at the conventions was there's two things. The main thing going against us is there was such a big book for such an unknown author. A lot of people weren't willing to take a risk on it, even though it was clearly a very good book and everybody agreed.
Right. It sounds like what you're doing is a kind of cutting-edge new genre where the comic book has become a serious and religion and philosophy, and it's looking like New Yorkers of what you mean. Did a thing about the aging couple. And did a graphic novel type thing. Rob's Chess. There's very famous cartoons.
Jazz. I know Jazz.
And she did a beautiful job. And what you're doing sounds like a whole new place to go. It wouldn't be the comic book stores. It would be different outlets that we don't even know what they are yet.
That's what we're exploring. That's what I'm saying. We're trying to find different channels like a religious convention. But once again, you gotta bang on the door loud enough for them to notice you're there.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking of book clubs, places that have never done things in a comic book form.
Right. Well, that's what I mean exactly. And that's the thing with advertising. If you have any leads, if you have any places that I think I could write letters to or get in contact with somebody, I'd love to hear of it. Otherwise, all I can do is do web searches and see what comes up.
Well, even in the community level, in your community, there's a women's book club. Some very different kind of venue.
Right.
They've never done something in that format.
Right. Well, exactly. That's what I mean. It's just about it. People ask me if I've been busy. I mean, that's the kind of thing I've been busy doing. It's not easy. If you just throw flyers out there and forget about them, they'll pay as much attention as it's easy. The truth is
you almost have to educate people. This is not a this is a
it's really the issue was you have to find the decision maker, you have to get his attention and show the book to them and have them open the book. I don't even have to tell them what it is. Once they open the book, they're interested. But just to get to that point, that's a lot of work. Especially
agent.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it's all new to me. Yeah, that's new. Publicizing and finding an agent and finding the right people. That's new. Yeah, right. Well, you know Michael Mendelson, he's the guy that produced Fight Club, as well as a bunch of other movies. He came to our table, he bought a book, he gave us his number. Whether he answered or we did, I actually invited him to this.
Call him, you took it because he gave you his number.
Right.
You didn't ask for his number, he gave it to you.
Yeah, I got it. Sure.
But don't create side things that aren't too obvious. Go to people like him.
Yeah. No, I think, because he was saying about should we make a movie out of this, and like, no, I told him exactly. I mean, honestly, before I even made the book, I thought, CGI was just coming out, and I thought, wow, Dante can show the CGI movie, that would be amazing.
The gentleman that does his movie just came out like a week ago or this weekend about his comic book.
Right.
What is it?
Frank Miller.
Frank Miller. Oh yeah, Sin City.
I mean, you said you weren't in New York real bad, but you're in Hollywood where all this stuff is.
No, I know. But that's the thing is, it's easy to make something into a movie. It's a lot harder to make a book. So maybe we will go like from a unknown book. Who knows? Yeah, we'll see. Well, a lot of books, like the Scott. I don't know if you heard about Scott Pilgrim that came out as a movie. It's kind of a cult classic, and then Universal made a movie out of it, and they wound up selling a ton more books. Actually, I mean, you see that similar trend going on in Comic-Con. Comic-Con used to be a tiny little venue for just comic books, and then Hollywood realized they could make movies out of it.
It was the Big Bang Theory that made it famous.
No, the Big Bang Theory and Twilight. And,
I mean, they talk about Comic-Con.
it was pretty popular once Big Bang Theory came out. There used to be just 5,000 people at the
Anyway, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming.